I'm so glad to be here. What a lovely afternoon it is. I am so glad to be here. It's been a while, but we're back, and all is going very, very well. Wow. Wow. It's been an exciting few days for me, and I will get into that when we talk in the opening remarks. I'll just talk about that a little bit. But before we get into that, be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. And while you're at it, be sure to post this on Reddit, post this on Facebook, post this on Twitter, post this on Instagram, post this everywhere videos are posted, everywhere videos are shared. That would be awesome. That would be absolutely awesome if you did that. I'm so glad that all of you are here. There's already a super chat, and I have to scroll up to see what it is. Oh, it's just a nice super chat from Gleb. Well, thank you, Gleb, for your super chat. You didn't even ask me a question, but that's okay. Gleb, you're an appreciated member of the community. That's the way we do the show here. I give my opening remarks, then we do the roll call, and I call people out. Press F to pay. Thank you, Homemade Beats. Thank you, Homemade Beats. Thank you very much. We'll talk some about the book, not too much, but yes, the way we do this is I give my opening remarks, then we do the roll call, and after we do the roll call, then I answer your super chat questions, and then that's the end of the show. So it's just kind of that's the way we do it. And thank you, A. Coco, for the super chat. Much appreciated. So glad to be back. I had to take a little summer vacation. I don't know if that's the right word for it. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and we're going to start the opening remarks now. All right, folks, welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. As you can see, we have a new painting behind us. This is a totally new painting. I'm not quite sure what it is. Looks kind of like a beach maybe, but it's kind of like pinkish or purple, and I don't know. It's like a 1980s Technicolor beach or something. Not quite sure how the totally real and not fake painting behind me that goes off and then I have a remote to turn it back on works, but I will eventually figure that out. Great to see me again. Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind. Folks, I have spent the last few days in central Pennsylvania in a little place called Saxton, Saxton. There is a little tiny town about 2.5 hours away from Pittsburgh and about 3.5 hours away from Philadelphia in central Pennsylvania called Saxton. And that was the site of the very first Center for Political Innovation weekend retreat. Emotional labor, we'll talk about that. That was the very first site of the Center for Political Innovation weekend retreat. And it was utterly amazing. 36 guests attended. Wow. 36 guests plus two from the professional camera crew, and it was amazing. It was just utterly amazing. Good crew of people helped put it on. We had a folk singer. My good friend Paul, the folk singer, actually printed the Center for Political Innovation songbook. He designed the artwork, he redid the lyrics to a lot of old communist classic songs, and he led the group in singing songs all weekend. That was amazing. We had a great crew of facilitators, people whose job it was to kind of make the weekend work. We had like a facilitator training. They kept track of different attendees. That was beautiful. That was great. It was amazing. It was just great. And I mean, it was just utterly amazing. And the Center for Political Innovation is moving ahead. We are moving ahead as an organization. 36 people, and nothing big went wrong. You know, there were a few little moments where things could have gone a little more smoothly, but the food was great. We had some caterers from the area come. The facility that we rented was beautiful. And I mean, you couldn't imagine a more like diverse group of people. I mean, there were people that drove in from Texas. There were people who drove in from parts of Pennsylvania, from New York City, from upstate New York. It was all over the East Coast where we've got supporters of our movement. And it was really, 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 really amazing. Biden, Carter, who is Reagan? It was really amazing. It was just utterly, utterly amazing. Hammer and Sickle. It was just great. And we're going to do it again on the West Coast. We're going to do it again on the West Coast. So if you're part of the Center for Political Innovation, you've been on our weekly Zoom calls, you'll get an invite. If you're on the West Coast, if you're a Patreon supporter, you're going to be, it was utterly amazing. It was utterly amazing. It was just great. I had a great time, and so did everybody else. I mean, it was great. And I mean, there were men there, there were women there were straight people there were gay people there were trans people there. There were white people, there were Latino people, there were black people there. I mean, it was a diverse group of people, some people from the cities, some people from rural places, and it was just amazing. It was just amazing. It was just amazing. And, it wasn't all speeches. I did give 2 classes, and those classes will be on YouTube. Very professional video in the works. There was the camera crew had 3 different cameras running, professional mics, lights, everything. It was very professional video. That'll be up pretty soon as I can get my hands on it. But it wasn't all just speeches. We had some speeches. Chris Halulli, the communist candidate for Congress in Vermont, gave a great presentation. Don Corder from Revolution Report, which is a great YouTube channel. He's another guy who works with me at RT. He's also a communist, and he gave a great presentation. Overall, this was just a great weekend. In so many ways, it was just an amazing weekend. And so I want to personally thank everybody who made that weekend a success. The facilitator team, the donors, the contributors who helped make it happen. And now we just have to focus on getting the video together. And on top of that, we just have to focus on doing it again on the West Coast. We got to do it again on the West Coast because, there's a lot of people from California who wanted to come and were willing to buy tickets and fly out for it. But, I said, wouldn't it make more sense if I flew to California rather than having all the California people fly in? So we're going to do it at the end of August in California, in Santa Barbara. We're going to do it. So if you are part of our little community, you just need to message me and I can arrange for you to get an invitation to the retreat. We obviously, these aren't public events. We're not at the point where we can have public events at this point, with the pandemic and all of that. But we're looking to start having public events. We're investigating the possibility of maybe even having a small public event here before the end of July, perhaps a panel in New York City. But that's not confirmed. We got to make sure that, that everything's in order to do that. But, it's great. And the Center for Political Innovation is moving ahead. I mean, we are doing something utterly amazing. And the wide variety of people. My friend who's a minister came, Reverend Gavin Lockhart, and he gave a beautiful opening prayer. The legendary Marxist-Leninist trucker Dust James was there. Oh, wow. I mean, Parasocialite was there. Parasocialite, who's got a YouTube channel, he was there. It was awesome. I've posted on my Facebook page. I was able to shoot a little bit with my phone, and that I could upload instantly. So that video is up there. But the professional video is coming very soon. It was amazing. We woke up in the morning. We all did exercises together in formation. It was beautiful, beautiful stuff. We sang songs, we sang communist songs, we chanted, and oh man, it was amazing, and it was totally the break I need from city life. It was peaceful, so much love in the room, and we want to make it happen again. We want to make it happen again, and we want to start having regular events around the country. We are building a community of solidarity. That was the name of one of the broadcasts, one of the web conferences that we had called Building Communities of Solidarity. And that's really what we are trying to do. We're trying to build communities of solidarity. There's a long tradition of communists doing this. I talked about how, one of the older women who was with me when I was in a political group, she was in her 80s, and she could remember back in the 1930s when she was a small child going to Young Pioneers Camp. right? They used to have the Young Pioneers in upstate New York. They used to have Camp Wo Chi Ka. And what did Wo Chi Ka stand for? No, it was not Native American, right? We always assume that in the United States. When we hear like, terms that sound like a little bit, we assume it comes from Native American. But Camp Wo Chi Ka did not come from any Native American language or dialect. In the United States, you might think that, but that's not the camp. Camp Wo Chi Ka, located in upstate New York, stood for Workers' Children's Camp. The Workers' Children's Camp. And they used to wear little red berets and sing, 1, 2, 3, young pioneers are we. We're fighting for the working class against the bourgeoisie. And then there was another verse that you can't sing now because the English language has changed. The English language has changed, but the next verse was 4, 5, 6. We are the Bolsheviks. We're fighting for the working class against the dirty dicks. Now you can't say that because that means penises now. But back then, dicks referred to detectives, police officers. And so they were the Bolsheviks fighting for the working class against the dirty dicks. 1930s terminology. And that actually comes from Dick Tracy. It comes from the comic of Dick Tracy, right? That's where they started calling police officers dicks because of Dick Tracy. DeSantis passed a bill. Okay. Bill teaching evils of communism. All right. Very good. But yeah, it was really great. But there's other things. I mean, it's so amazing. Like, it's weird how, like, so many things have just, like, piled on all at once. So not only did we have this amazing retreat, singing, everyone got a copy of the CPI political manual. It was great. It was great. Char Char Darling was there. She was there, played a great role in the retreat. Joe the Red was there. I want to name everybody. I don't want anyone to feel like they've been snubbed. I want to name everybody who was there, but you'll see the videos, right? Lily was there. Wow. I mean, it was utterly amazing. It was just amazing, this event we had. Everyone left there with this glowing feeling, right? It was just beautiful. It was a beautiful, beautiful weekend. And we're building real communities of solidarity, working class power, right? And it was such an intersection of people. I mean, people from every walk of life, people from every corner of the United States who are ready to unite around optimistic, 21st century constructive socialism. Not this synthetic left garbage, not this pessimism, not this tearing people down, but beautiful constructive socialism. So many people are just hungry for what we have to offer. So many people. And I laid out a plan about how to move forward with building the Center for Political Innovation. Oh, wow. It was great. It was great. But again, this isn't the only thing. It's like things, all pile on at once. So for those of you who may be aware, my new book, BreadTube Serves Imperialism, is now available. And it's linked down below. You can get a copy of it. And it's selling like hotcakes. I mean, people are buying it. I mean, look at the reviews. I mean, it's only been up for a week. There's 3 reviews, almost all positive. Good stuff out there. It's great. And I am so glad that I can stop thinking about BreadTube now. I wrote a whole book about it. That's enough. Don't need to think about BreadTube anymore. But the book is now out there. People are reading it. People are loving it. People are lying about it, which is to be expected, but they're lying about it in ways that help me. They're like doing whole streams, just waving it around. You see this new book? Yes, this is a new book. You can buy it on Amazon, and it's bad. Read it. I mean, they're just waving it around. Like, it's like, please do that more. Like, seriously. Oh, this book that you could buy on Amazon for $18 is really bad, and it talks about it. Do you like my channel? He talks about me on it. It's like seriously. I mean, you couldn't pay for this product placement. Right? I mean, I call it unnamed diet beverage. They're not calling it unnamed book by unnamed person. They are talking about me. They're talking about the book, and they're like waving it around, and they're exaggerating about it. That's like the best part, right? A certain person who will not be named thinks the whole book is about him. That's what he said. The whole book is about him. The whole book is about him. Yeah, there's about 4 or 5 paragraphs about him in it. But hey, if he wants to tell his audience that likes him that the whole book is about him, go for it, my friend. I hope all of his fans buy it and I hope they actually read it, and I hope they learn something. I mean, this is great. I have never had a book sell as much as this book is selling, as quickly as it's selling. I mean, obviously it hasn't sold as many as my other books, but it's only been out for a week, for goodness sakes. I mean, and this is amazing, right? And people are going to read this book, and they're going to learn about R. Palm Dutt, the brilliant Marxist thinker of British history, who wrote the very, very good book called Fascism and Social Revolution, explaining what fascism actually is. They're going to learn all about Peter Kropotkin. Peter Kropotkin is where the name BreadTube comes from. It comes from the book The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin. And I actually talk about who Peter Kropotkin really was. He was overall a good guy, right? Mixed, he did some mistakes, but overall Peter Kropotkin was a pretty good dude, right? He had some disagreements with Lenin, but, Lenin gave him the respect that he deserved, They had a very big funeral procession for him. All right, Christian MLs. Very big, funeral procession for him. Peter Kropotkin was a good dude. I talk about William Z. Foster. I quote extensively, obviously, from Marx and Lenin and Mao Zedong. The book goes over so much good territory, and it refutes. There's three particular arguments that the breadtubers make that I go after in the book. The first of which is their misconception. They think socialism is a system of profit-centered worker co-ops, right? And they don't understand the problem with capitalism is the profit motive, and they don't understand that the goal is not worker co-ops, and they don't understand that capitalism in our age is imperialism. They don't understand that. So I talk about what capitalism and socialism actually mean. I also talk about their confusion about what fascism is. They don't know what fascism is. They think fascism is an aesthetic. They think fascism is hand gestures. They think fascism is when people disagree with them. They think fascism is anything that is against BreadTube is fascist. Everything's a fascist code word. I talk about the actual scientific understanding of what fascism is. That's another point I make. And the other point I hit them on is this degrowth stuff, right? This pessimism, this belief that, the population is too large, we need to drive down living standards, their pessimistic worldview and their obsession with ugliness. I get into all of that. It's three points I hit them on. I introduce them to real ML. I talk about their links to a particularly shady figure, who's not part of the BreadTube community, certainly not part of the BreadTube community. Read and respond to reviews, I'll write it down. Not part of the BreadTube community, but is kind of advising them behind the scenes. That's the whole reason I wanted to write the book. People think I wrote the book because these people talk shit about me. I'm sorry. If I were to write a book about every person who ever talked shit about me, I would never do anything, right? I would just be sitting around writing books all day because it's like, just because someone talks shit about me doesn't mean they deserve a book. The reason that I chose to write this book is because an unnamed source, that's amazing. When you're in this business, when you're a journalist, when you're a political analyst, reunification of split parties. When you're a journalist, people come to you when they have some inside info, right? You have to check it out. You have to make sure it's correct. You have to make sure that your sources are credible. But somebody approached me, won't say who, with some information about a very, very shady person, a certain individual who has been advising BreadTube from behind the scenes. And this individual, who has been functioning as an advisor to BreadTube, most likely a paid advisor, because this guy does not work for free, and he has a reputation for charging lots of money. And this person has some pretty shady connections. And based on the research I did on this individual, which I did some very in-depth research, had to be very careful what I said about him, didn't want him to sue me, right? Made sure that everything I said was accurate. But this particular individual, who is tied to some kidnappings and is tied to U.S. military intelligence through his mentor, who was a U.S. military intelligence psychiatrist. Not going to say his name. You have to buy the book to find out who he is. But there is an individual who has been serving as an advisor. He's been giving, behind-the-scenes advice, from what I understand, to ContraPoints, to Faraday Speaks, to Vosh, and some others. I was given some inside info, some intelligence, that this particular person is the advisor to BreadTube. And so based on that, I was able to put BreadTube in its proper context. All right, unify communists. I was able to put BreadTube in its proper context, and that is the basis for the book, right? That is the basis for the book. And I'm not going to say who that individual is. You have to go buy the book and find out who it is. But there's a particular person, not a very prominent person, but he's somebody who's, he's been on CNN a few times. He's been around for decades. And he apparently is advising BreadTube. And that really tells you everything you need to know about BreadTube. Once you find out this guy is advising BreadTube, then it explains everything. And then from there, I go after their political beliefs, their confusion about what socialism is, and their beliefs about degrowth and the environment, and their wackadoo, their belief that fascism is like an aesthetic or something like that, actually understanding what fascism really means. And then I end by explaining the period we're in, the divisions in the ruling class, and the way forward, and the vision of the Center for Political Innovation, of constructive, optimistic socialism. So go read the book. Go read it. Go buy it. Go read it. Link down below. You're going to like this book. You're going to like this book. You will learn something from it. And that's even the people who read it. Now, there's a couple reviews that are already up there. And if you like the book, go and write a review on Amazon, because they're going to hit me. I know they're going to hit me. They're going to go and they're going to try to file as many negative reviews. People do that. Every so often I get a review and it's like, I didn't actually read this book, but I saw a video that said this guy's bad. So, whatever. But, they're going to hit me. And so if you like the book, if you're a friend of this community, go and buy the book and write a positive review of it, because they're going to hit me with negative ones. But anyway, the 3 reviews that are up there right now, they're mixed. They're not 100% positive, but they're mostly positive. And it certainly wasn't what they thought it was going to be, and it certainly wasn't what the BreadTubers are saying it is. Though what they're saying right now is advertising the book. I mean, again, bring it on, please. If there's any Vosh fans watching right now, Vosh is 100% correct. The book is all about Vosh. 100%. Every single page of the book is about Vosh. I mean, whatever, man. Like, this is great. I mean, please, bring it on, guys. Bring it on. I mean, this is great, right? I mean, right? Here's the wild thing, right? In the scheme of things, this shows me how unimportant BreadTube really is, okay? I am the only person who has ever published a book with the word BreadTube in the title, okay? I mean, nobody else has published a book with BreadTube in the title, ever. There is not a single other book ever published to the time of this video. I mean, someone can run out and publish one right now with BreadTube in the title. And keep in mind, they have done their hardest. The ruling class of the United States has done their hardest to shove BreadTube down our throats. The New Yorker magazine is shoving ContraPoints down our throat, and Destiny, they're shoving him down our throat, and they have done everything to try to say, oh, you want to be a socialist? This is the kind of socialist you got to be. Here it is. There it is, right? But, there's histories of the Communist Party on for sale. Many histories of the Communist Party have been published. Many histories of the Socialist Workers' Party have been published. Many histories of American Trotskyism and American Maoism. But BreadTube has been doing their thing, and CNN has been promoting them, and the New York Times has been promoting them, and they've been shoving it down our throats, and nobody cares. Nobody cares, except for me. I mean, I saw an opening, right? And I had this piece of information because the person that I was talking to, they track the particular individual. They keep track of this particular individual. And when they discovered the link between BreadTube and this guy, they came to me with that information. And on that basis, I was able to publish a book, look, there you go. At one point last week, this was the 10th top-selling book in the category of anarchism. Did you know that? This was, of all the books on anarchism on Amazon, my book was 10th. It was the 10th top-selling book in the category of anarchism on all of Amazon.com. Right? Just saying. You know, and other people are saying it's doing even better now. I mean, this is great. This is great. Bring it on, folks. Bring it on. I mean, this is great. So anyway, enough about that, right? Enough about that. So who knew I would go write a book about a bunch of video game playing, smear, shit throwing nasty people. But hey, you got to do what you got to do. I wrote a book about Kamala Harris, right? I got some inside info on Kamala, and that gave me the idea to write a book. The book on Kamala Harris has been doing pretty well. I went on Sirius XM radio on Urban View, and that's been doing pretty well. So I got to tell you now that I just did an amazing interview this afternoon. You see what I'm talking about? It's like everything piles up. Sometimes it feels like nothing's happening, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, first retreat, boom, BreadTube book comes out, boom, big interview. So I just this afternoon had a conversation with Nancy Hollander. Do folks know who Nancy Hollander is? Nancy Hollander is probably the most famous lawyer in the United States. She was the lawyer representing Chelsea Manning. She represents Guantanamo Bay inmates. And right now she is working on the case of Alex Saab. And so I interviewed Nancy Hollander about the Alex Saab case and about Guantanamo Bay, and it was a great conversation. We talked for about 25 minutes. It'll be up pretty soon. It'll be airing. Some of it'll be airing on RT, but I'll have the whole thing on YouTube, so that you can see it, because that was, you need to see the whole thing. But the conversation that I had with Nancy Hollander was very wide-ranging, very good conversation. We talked about the Alex Saab case. We talked about Guantanamo Bay. So if you don't know who Alex Saab is, you need to know who Alex Saab is. Alex Saab, he is a Venezuelan diplomat, and he was traveling from Venezuela to Iran to get medicine for Venezuela during the pandemic. That's what he was doing. And his plane from Venezuela to Iran, as an official diplomatic mission, with an official letter, this was an official diplomatic mission. He was going from Venezuela to Iran. His plane stopped in Cape Verde in order to refuel. And the U.S. government pressured the Cape Verde authorities to pull him off the plane. And now they are trying to extradite him to the United States. And in Cape Verde, they were torturing him. And now he's finally been released to his home. They're not holding him in solitary confinement in Cape Verde. But they are trying at this point to extradite him to the United States to stand trial for the crime of trying to give medicine to the Venezuelans. And answer me this. If Venezuela, independent sovereign country, wants to buy medicine from Iran, independent sovereign country, who the hell does the United States think it is to get involved in that? It's none of the USA's business. If the USA wanted to buy medicine from Britain, do you think Iran could show up and be like, no, 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 no? Of course not, right? Marxists from Guatemala. No, they would not be able to do that. They would not be able to do that. I mean, that would be not permitted. I mean, it's a crazy case, but it follows, they've done the same thing to the CFO of Huawei Technologies, right? And the Guantanamo Bay, you've got a situation in Guantanamo Bay where those folks have been held without charges, there you go. There you go. I mean, the Alex Saab case is particularly outrageous. I got Nancy talking, and she talked about some of the stuff that has gone on at Guantanamo Bay. And you would be horrified if you knew some of the details. I don't want to get into it too much on here because I'd like to not get demonetized on this video. They'll probably demonetize the video of Nancy Hollander talking about it, but that's okay because people need to hear what our government is doing. So I'm not going to go into detail about what's been going on at Guantanamo Bay. But you'll be horrified, right? And what they're doing, they're threatening Alex Saab, and his position is, look, not only does the USA not have the right to grab me here, I'm a diplomat, this is diplomatic immunity, it's not illegal for Iran to get, give medicine to Venezuela. But on top of that, there's a very good chance that he would be tortured if he came back to the United States. And, Alex Saab, needs to be freed. And that's that. That's that. So I'm hoping that video will be up tomorrow, and it'll be airing tomorrow on RT. My interview. It was really great to talk to Nancy Hollander. It was really, really great. Nancy Hollander is a brave lawyer, probably the most famous and most important lawyer in the United States. There's like films about her. She's great. She was great. So I'm really glad I had the opportunity to speak to Nancy Hollander. So keep looking for that. But yeah. Things are going well. Things are going well for our community. Things are not going well in the world, and that's why our community is all the more important. The work that we do is vitally important, and we need to keep doing what we do and keep fighting and striving to build our community, because the ruling class is getting more and more vicious. The capitalists fight with one another to corner the markets and divide up the world. Their greed for maximum profits, it's the cause of war and keeps us on the dole. Their greed leads them into a crisis, which they try to resolve with a more fascist state. But our struggle is against the whole capitalist system, so strike out the fascists as well as the cuts. I quote that a lot from my favorite, not my favorite, I like it kind of ironically, from Cornelius Cardew, the experimental composer turned Marxist-Leninist. Good stuff, folks. Good stuff. Good stuff, folks. Well, listen. I don't have a huge amount of opening remarks for you, but one last thing. One last thing. One last thing before we go to the roll call and I start answering super chats. One final point, and the one final point for today is this. So, Patreon, right? Unfortunately, with all the planning I was doing for our weekend retreat and writing the BreadTube book and all that, I have kind of fallen behind on the Patreon's only streams. But fear not, patrons. You have not been forgotten. You have not been forgotten. You have not been ignored. You have not been forgotten, you have not been ignored, and there will be a patrons-only stream for patrons only for people that are members on Patreon. We'll be watching the stream on Thursday, July 1st. Thursday, July 1st, you'll be on the stream, patrons-only stream. So tune in. Be sure to tune in on July 1st. That is Thursday. If you're a patron, watch for the link. I'll be sending the link for the patrons only stream. I'll be sending out that link. Michael Lynn's. I'll be sending that link out. And that's for our patrons community. And if you want to join and be part of our upcoming patrons only stream that will be on July 1st, and why now all you have to do is go below and sign up on Patreon and become a part of the Patreon community. And yes, every Patreon community member, for the most part, if you give enough, if you're giving a decent amount, you're giving me at least $10 a month, you'll get a BreadTube book, right? You'll get a BreadTube book if you're a member of the Patreon community. That's the way it works. It takes some time. You don't get it immediately, but that's the way it works. Whenever I have a new book come out, if you're a member at a decent level, I mean, if you give me $1 a month, I'm not going to send you a book. But if you're a member of the patron community and you're giving me a decent amount every month, like $10, you usually the way it works is you get a book. You might have to, remind me to send you your book, but that's the way it works, right? When the Kamala Harris book came out, all the Patreon people got a Kamala Harris book. When the CPI manual, the educational manual came out, all the people on the Patreon community got one. And so, yes, if you're signed up on Patreon, you will eventually, it'll take a little bit, but you will get a BreadTube Serves Imperialism book. So that's one of the perks of being a member of the Patreon community. So sign up on Patreon right now, if you want to be part of our upcoming patrons only stream that's happening on Thursday. So there you go. Those are my opening remarks. And on that note, folks, names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations, please. Names and locations. Who's with us? Robert Webb says hello. Well, hello to you, Robert. Chaya in Montreal. Hello to you. Tristan in Maryland. Shout out to you, Parasocialites. Studio City, California. B-Level from Canada. Ryan in Oakland. Kendall in San Diego, San Francisco. Jason Sarna in Vallejo, California. Robert in Hawaii. Juan from Mexico. Serbia. Dallas, Texas, Longhorn. Bergen County, New Jersey. New York City, Heavy Dukes. Nassau County, Char Char Darling. Poland, Yvonne in Poland. Is it Ivan, Yvonne? JT24 is out in Mississippi. Welcome. Finland, Wisconsin. Brad, St. Louis, San Angelo, Solidarity. Great folks out there. Great folks. They came to my event. I got a group picture with them. They are great folks. They brought their own tent. This is a great group of folks brought their own tent. It was amazing. Marty in Illinois, Springfield, Missouri, Ben in Chile, Noy from Glendale, California, UK, Peter from Poland, Stephen from Riverside, California, Tony in Tasmania, Tucker Marks on the clock, Meredith and Quinn in Eatonville, Washington, welcome, Santa Barbara, California, very good, DC area, Max the Sax, welcome, always good to have you here, Montana, there you go. Tom in Pennsylvania, Berlin. Southwest France, Abram, very good. Kim from Jersey City, New Jersey. Huey Long is with us. Brian Schaefer, Adelaide, Australia. Hi, Caleb. It's Mark from Aberdeen, Scotland. Welcome. Riverside County, California. Michigan. Mike Billings, Montana. Lake County, Illinois. Liechtenstein, New Zealand, very good. Pomona, California. Vinicius from Brazil. Phoenix, Arizona. Steve from Southwest Michigan. Ben in Hungary. Berlin, Little Falls, New Jersey. Ben in Chile. The Woodlands of Texas. Denver, Colorado. Dublin, Ireland. Kenny from Malaysia, East Germany. There we go. Andres from Norway. Seattle. Caracas, Venezuela. I mentioned the CPI on my history thesis. You are a hero to our nation. Wow. I'm honored to hear that, Jose. Please send that to me. Send me an email. First name, last name, Caleb Maupin at Gmail. I want to hear about this. Right? Moscow Mills, Missouri. Dario and Tamara and Carolyn in Brooklyn. Wow, usually it's just Dario and Tamara in Brooklyn, but now Carolyn is with them. Shout out to you, Carolyn. Glad you all are here, and shout out to you, Daria and Tamara. Very good stuff. David from Michigan, loving the new book. Wow, I'm really glad you liked it, David. Gadsden, Alabama. Columbus, Ohio on the clock. Portugal, Detroit, Hamilton, Ontario. Gothenburg, Sweden, UK, thanks for broadcasting while we're awake. Yes, I do my best to have a diversity of times. Nashville, Tennessee, Palo, North California, Calvin from Saskatoon, right? Pirate Alex in Cleveland, right? San Jose. We need more city builders. Keep up the inspiration, says Ewoks Unhinged. Great, great. And you just did a new video on the book, I believe. Check that out. I go on your channel here and there. That's good stuff, right? Caleb called me out. I love you, Caleb. The Inundation. Very good. I'm really glad. Seattle. DL Seattle. Richie in Staten Island. There you go. Balthazar in Oakland. Fred from Alameda is with us. Fred from Alameda, welcome. Glad to have you here. Welcome, folks. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell, right? We want to make sure you're notified the next time we do one of these. Share this on Facebook. Share this on Twitter. Share this on Reddit. I am back from my little vacation in Saxton, Pennsylvania. It was wild. We decorated the lodge, right? We had to decorate this lodge where we had our thing. We had to decorate it, and thank you to all the people that were there on Thursday, all the facilitators for the facilitator training, because we had a lot of decorating. We had a beautiful, huge banner that said Center for Political Innovation, had our logo on it. We had all these flags from different socialist countries. We had the Soviet flag and the Chinese flag, the East German flag, and the Irish Freedom, Starry Plough flag, and yeah, it was great. It was almost like Sheldon Cooper on Big Bang Theory. He has fun with flags. It was almost like fun with flags. Part of the reason we had to put up the flags, this was wild, at this lodge that we rented in Saxton that I found on Airbnb. There was a deer's head mounted on the wall. That's pretty normal for a hunting lodge. But below it was the deer's butt. I mean, who does that, right? I mean, you shoot the deer, you put the deer on the head on the wall. That's pretty normal. But who does that with the butt? I just thought that was weird. They mounted below the head of the deer, they mounted the deer's butt. And so we had to just get the flags out and cover it up. I was not going to have a deer's butt in my video. Just wasn't going to happen. Deer head, fine. Deer horns, there were horns throughout the lodge, whatever. But the butt, no. So to cover the deer butt, we got the flags out. And yeah, it looked really, really great. I mean, it looked really, really great. We put flags up all over the walls. That was awesome. That was totally awesome. The place was well decorated. The music was great. We did a lot of chanting, right? What is it? We are city builders. We are city builders. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Dare to struggle, dare to win. CPI. It was beautiful. It was great stuff. Great stuff. Great stuff. Everybody who left had this glowing feeling. I have not had one complaint or negative bit of feedback. It was great. Great classes, great presentations, video coming soon. We're going to be doing this again. The vision that I have for the CPI is stuff like this going on all the time, all over the country. We are ready to expand. We are ready to grow. People are hungry for what we have to offer. That was made clear to me this weekend. It was made abundantly clear to me. We're going to do it again in California. It's going to be great. Char Char Darling says, Mao, Mao, Mao Zedong, Ho, Ho, Ho Chi Minh. And we did a lot of chanting. That was great. That was great stuff. So if you got more questions for me, just shoot me a super chat. I write them down. That's how it works. And now we will start the second half of the show. Excuse me there. The second half of the show in which I answer your super chat questions. Question number 1 is the concept of emotional labor. The concept of emotional labor. Now, that's interesting. That's an interesting concept because on the one hand, I can understand what they're saying. I don't know if you've ever been to an event or been to have a meeting with somebody or you sat down with a friend and it's been a really emotionally heavy conversation. And you can leave that conversation almost feeling like you carried a big, heavy weight, right? Even though you were sitting there in your chair the whole time, you discussed things that were very heavy, very tough. Maybe somebody cried a little bit. And it certainly takes a toll on you. It can tire you out. It can leave you exhausted. So, to say that emotions don't have a physical impact, that it can't be demanding, in order to do emotional things for work. I mean, that's just not accurate. I mean, why do you think, why do you think therapists get paid, right? They say, all they do is just sit and talk to people all day. What do you think they sit and talk to them about? There's a reason that's a job that one has to have a license to do and all of that, right? So on the one hand, I can understand it. However, on the other hand, I have seen the concept misused, right? Because, I don't know, I know there's a lot of different people I know, friends of mine, people I know, and sometimes I'll sit down with them and they'll want to talk about something heavy with me. They'll say, I want to talk about a painful experience they had. I want to talk about something that really bothers them. And I don't sit there and go, excuse me, I did not agree to give you this emotional labor. Can you control yourself? Can we talk about I'm not a dick, right? And then part of being somebody's friend is agreeing to take on at least some level of emotional labor. Now, obviously, with some, you have to have boundaries. And that's true. I do, you set boundaries with people. You got to set boundaries with people. There are some people that'll be inappropriate, right? And if things take on a sexual connotation, at that point, you really need to make a boundary here, right? It's like things start to move in a sexual direction. You either stop it, or you don't. But you have to be very clear, right? There has to be clear consent in any sexual situation. But if it's just simply a conversation that gets a little bit heavy, I mean, how would you measure it? How would you measure it? Right? There's somebody I knew, how many years ago? It was like 6 or 7 years ago. There was somebody I knew, we would get together and talk every so often. This person I knew. And, the person had some issues, and that was okay. The person would start crying when they talked to me, and that's okay. People do that, right? People have their issues. I mean, there's a lot of people struggling nowadays. A lot of people are out there struggling. And that's okay. You can struggle. I mean, I've struggled in my life. We have burdens. We have hardships. I mean, people have, and they have to deal with this stuff, right? And it's good to have a friend. I'd say it's better to have a friend that you can talk about than a therapist. A therapist, you're paying them, but a friend is somebody you can sit down with. A friend is somebody who it's a mutual thing. But you talk about them, you talk about you. But there was this person I would sit down with. Almost every conversation we had, they would start crying. Okay. That the person had a lot of issues. And sometimes, as we would talk, to make them feel better, I would share things that had happened to me or things that I'd known people who had happened that had been similar to what this person had dealt with as a way to kind of, make a connection with the person and also, make them feel a little bit better, right? And try to put their hardships in proper context. So a couple years later, someone said that this person I had spoken to felt that I was exploiting them for their emotional labor. And I heard that and I'm just like, what? I was just like, what? Huh? If anything, they were exploiting me for their emotional labor, but that was part of sitting with them. And I was very angry when I heard that. I was very angry when I heard that. Because if anything, this person was sitting there. Again, there was not a conversation we had where this person did not start crying. And I was trying to comfort them, but somehow they felt that I was exploiting them for their emotional labor. That was just, there are some people that are very, very, very full of drama. There are some people that are very good at turning any situation into a dramatic situation, right? If this person had felt that I somehow was exploiting them for their emotional labor, they should have said something and said, but if anything, it was this person who would take the conversations away from a political place, away from a, historical or educational place, away from the small talk place, and immediately take them to an emotional place, and immediately just break down in front of me and start crying. And I was okay with that for the most part. I mean, whatever. I mean, I try to be a supportive friend, but then I would try to get them to relate. And the things that I shared with them were generally things I had been sharing for the purpose of trying to comfort this person. And that's the right thing to do, right? If there's somebody around you who's suffering, you want to support them and you want to say, wow, I had a friend who went through that, and they went through that, and here's how they dealt with it. Or, okay, well, there was something similar like that happened to me. And, if you're going to do that, you want it to be balanced. So when the person said that, when I heard that secondhand from somebody, I just thought, are you kidding me? And that made me just full of disgust at this person. And, one thing I have learned is that there occasionally, and I hate to say this, right? You don't want to say this. You want to just be able to embrace anybody. But occasionally there will be somebody who comes along who their hardships and their difficulties, you kind of have to give them their space, right? Because you're not going to be able to really help them, but they're going to bring you down, and you have to give them their space. Give them some time to get their stuff together, right? Just because somebody, you can try to help them out, and you can try to help them out, but if they don't really want help, but they want to bring you down, it's not good. It's not good, right? It's not a good thing. That's my advice. The other thing, stay away from anyone who's jealous of you. If you encounter somebody who is jealous of you, get out of there. If somebody's jealous of you, and there's one thing if someone looks up to you, maybe wants to accomplish the things you've accomplished, that's great. But if somebody resents what you have, if somebody is jealous of you, get out of there. Get out of there. Get out of there. That's my advice. But anyway, I'm not the guy to talk to, right? I'm a guy who writes books. I talk on the internet. I'm not here to give life advice, but somebody did ask me about this concept of emotional labor. And I'm just telling you, it reminds me of this situation where the person brought it up. And I would say, sure. Taking on emotions is it takes a weight. It's heavy. So there you go. Lenin's atheism. All right, very good. Lenin's atheism. Very good. All right, but that's enough about emotional labor. Now, the next question that we're asked is someone said, Biden and Carter, who is Reagan? So if Jimmy Carter, right, if Joe Biden is Jimmy Carter, then who is Ronald Reagan? That was what they asked. Because many times I have pointed out that Joe Biden and Jimmy Carter have a similar approach, similar public, a public image that's very similar, and they're pushing a similar political program. And we know that Carter was demolished by the Reagan Revolution, right? The rise of the neocons, Well, here's the thing, and this is what you need to understand. Ward Churchill, all right. All right, here's what you need to understand. You ready for this? Now, what was the fight between Jimmy Carter and his wing of the U.S. ruling class and Ronald Reagan and his wing of the ruling class about? There's a material basis for all of this, right? It wasn't a fight about personalities. There may have been personality differences, but the fight that launched the Reagan Revolution, that deposed Jimmy Carter, was a fight between the soft power apparatus of the American government, Zbigniew Brzezinski, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the DuPonts, the old entrenched interests, the big oil companies, the intelligence apparatus, the Eastern establishment of the United States, and the military-industrial complex, right? Ronald Reagan was in with the defense people. He was in with defense spending, weapons manufacturers. He was in with them. That was a big part of what he was about. Jimmy Carter, on the other hand, called himself a student of Zbigniew Brzezinski. Jimmy Carter, almost all of the people in his administration came out of a think tank called the Trilateral Commission that had been created by Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger. And they pushed slow growth. They pushed degrowth, right? The idea there are too many people in the world. We need to reduce the population. Working hard at a job you hate. We need to reduce the population. He pushed overpopulation. He pushed, kind of identity politics. He pushed the idea of making the United States seem like it was more sensitive on issues of race and issues of gender. But at the same time, pushing soft power behind the scenes in Afghanistan and in Nicaragua and elsewhere. And that Jimmy Carter represented that more effective evil. BlackAgendaReport.com, they have come up with this term that they refer to as instead of calling Obama the lesser of two evils, they call him the more effective evil. And the Brzezinski folks, the Brzezinski Eastern establishment wing of American politics, is the smarter, more effective, strategic, long-term evil, I would argue. Whereas the military-industrial complex is the short-term, make lots of money for weapons contractors, blow things up, beat your chest about anti-communism. If you want to understand the difference between Carter and Reagan, you have to think about imagine that you and your spouse are trying to negotiate with your neighbors, and your spouse is really angry, and it's like, and you, on the other hand, you're also kind of angry about it, but you're trying to actually negotiate a resolution. Say you and your neighbors are having a fight, and your spouse is constantly going, you jerk it, and you're like, shut up, I'm trying to solve the problem. The Eastern establishment, they hate communism, they hate socialism, they want to drive living standards down, they want global neoliberalism, but they're trying to be strategic about it. Meanwhile, military-industrial complex is like, I'm going to blow things up. I hate commies. Kill them. Destroy them. Boom. And Brzezinski and the Council on Foreign Relations and the CIA are sitting there, can you shut up, please? We're trying to make this work. This is a strategy. And the military-industrial complex is like, God damn it, I want to make money. Blow things up. Kill them. Kill the commies. Hate the Reds. Die. And that's the fight, right? It's really the fight, right? And they are all about gradually pushing forward the strategy on the one hand, and the military-industrial complex can't control itself. It needs money, it needs blood, it needs weapons, it hates the Reds, it loves capitalism, and that's the divide. They have basically the same worldview, basically the same agenda, but one of them is strategically making compromises and strategically trying to gradually do it in kind of a smart, long-term way, and the other is just trying to blow things up. Jimmy Carter, very famously, he signed the SALT Treaty, the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, right? The SALT Treaty. And when he did that, retired generals took out an ad in the New York Times condemning him for doing that. That was big. It was very, very big, right? Jimmy Carter cut military spending. Jimmy Carter, seemed to be pursuing a policy of détente, de-escalating the arms race. And that was very, very much a strategy that hurt the military-industrial complex. And Jimmy Carter's economic policies at home, right? The way that he put Paul Volcker in control of the Federal Reserve and the way they got rid of all the local usury laws. It used to be that every state in the United States had a law, not every state, I'm sorry, let me correct myself. It used to be that a number of U.S. states had a law that you couldn't lend money at a certain amount of interest, or it was illegal. It was called usury, right? The states had a limit on interest. And Paul Volcker, and under the administration of Jimmy Carter, lifted all of those rules, right? And, Jimmy Carter, he went after the labor wing of his own party, right, with abscam. And that Jimmy Carter was he was about kind of demolishing the lower levels of the U.S. economy, right? Securing a monopoly for the big oil companies by demolishing and just blowing to bits, the lower level capitalists. And he told the weapons manufacturers, we're going to cut military spending, and you had, people waiting in line for a long time for gasoline, fuel shortages, and you had, the slow growth reports coming out, and he was trying to get everyone to have less, right? That was the message. Ronald Reagan, on the other hand, it's morning in America, Reagan revolution, get the commies. Reagan, when he came in, raised military spending and all of that. The basis for Ronald Reagan being able to do what he did was that there was enough of an economy outside of the ruling faction, right? There was enough of an economy outside of the big oil companies, outside of the huge corporations like General Electric. There was enough of a lower level of capital, right? There was enough of a lower level of capital that they could rally kind of a revolt. Now, they were forced, and this is what's quite interesting, they were forced to accept George Herbert Walker Bush, as the running mate of Reagan. And George Herbert Walker Bush, he had been CIA director, and he was a big oil guy. He was an old school Eastern establishment, New England, Connecticut, old school Eastern establishment guy. So Reagan was forced pretty quickly to make a compromise. But the Reagan Revolution was very much the lower levels of capital kind of rising up against Jimmy Carter and his slow growth policies. Jimmy Carter was all about Malthusianism. It was all about, strategically rolling back the influence of communists around the world. He was all about kind of an early version of the woke makeover that we're seeing now. And the lower levels of capital, the weapons manufacturers, the lower level companies, they weren't going to have it. Well, nowadays, we have a situation where we have Joe Biden in the White House. And Joe Biden is he's all about slow growth and Malthusianism. He's all about making the United States look weak while maneuvering behind the scenes with soft power. And he's in with the Eastern establishment, the big oil companies, the big banks. He's in with the Silicon Valley. See, Silicon Valley is a pretty big game changer. There was no Silicon Valley back in 1979, 1980. That, the computer companies were new. They were not, they were not a big factor. There was no social media. There was no internet. But it's the entrenched power, the higher levels of capital, the Silicon Valley fascists, the big oil monopolies. Those folks are in with Biden. And it was those lower level capitalists that were in with Trump, like My Pillow, Mike Lindell, Betsy DeVos. It was Betsy DeVos, right? Remember Betsy DeVos? She was, multi-level marketing and Blackwater military contractors. And, there was, who else? Who else was in, the guy who owns Home Depot, Bernie Marcus, right? Those folks were in with... Those folks were in with Trump. But the thing is, the pandemic has wrecked those lower level capitalists. So they were in a much weaker spot, number one. Number two, Silicon Valley is now a factor, right? Social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So those lower level capitalists are in a much weaker position today than they were in the 1980s, right? In the 1980s, there was still very much a vibrant domestic economy. Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Middle America was in a much stronger position. The lower level capitalists, the hotel chains, the restaurant, they were in a much stronger position to push back against the ultra rich. Nowadays, they aren't. Silicon Valley, that's the ultra-rich, right? Big oil companies, the fracking companies are just about dead, right? The fracking companies have just been killed practically by the pandemic, by the oil price drop. The frackers, I really think that the lower levels of capital that fomented a revolt against Jimmy Carter, they're not really in a position to foment a revolt against Biden. Donald Trump, they did something there, but Donald Trump is out. And January 6th, Donald Trump and all of them, they're in a weak spot. For them to pull off, to be able to depose Biden or depose the Democrats is going to be very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. They are in an extremely weak spot at this point. Now, among the public, you could argue that there is still a very solid base of people who do support Donald Trump. And it's worth pointing out that Donald Trump did actually get more votes among black folks and Latino folks his second time around than in the first time around. Did you know that? 4 years after Trump was in office, he got more votes from black and Latinos than he did the first time he ran. So, the population is shifting. Things are shifting. Donald Trump has certainly changed things up a little bit, right? And that, the political apple cart has been kind of turned over. Donald Trump still tries to kind of be a populist, even though you watch, the speeches he's done since he left office, they're pretty lame. It's just, he's got the anti-immigrant bigotry. That's one big selling point, is he hates immigrants. He's going to build a big, huge wall. He hates Iran. And what has he got really? I don't know. But I guess the situation is that Trump and the lower levels of capital that Trump was appealing to are much weaker than they were during the Carter years. So there you go. That's my analysis of that. Should communists in the United States use the hammer and sickle? Well, you can use it among other communists. There's nothing wrong with that. You can use it among yourselves to build your community. But is it something you want to use in your broad outreach to the broad masses? That's the question. Because communists should be proud of who they are. Communist culture, red culture, is extremely important. Flags and salutes and communist songs and marching around, all that stuff is really important. It's really important. And among ourselves, that's our community. That's our heritage. That's our pride. And yes, we should do it. Yes, we should among ourselves. The question is, do we want to approach the broad masses with that or not? Right? That's the question. And ultimately, right, that, communists, we want to be part of a broad coalition, of a progressive coalition. So it may not be strategic to do that in all instances, but among ourselves, yes. At our conferences, yes. At our rallies, yes. At our gatherings, yes. At our retreats, yes. When we're being communists with other communists, yes. we may want to strategically approach the masses in a different way. We may want to work in coalitions where that's not how we present ourselves. But among ourselves, we should definitely use it, right? And again, that's, there's strategic ways to approach this. But yeah, among ourselves, nothing wrong with it. All right. There's a bill. Mandating that schools teach on the evils of communism that was passed in a state. Well, does that surprise you? Most schools already teach that. I mean, the schools I went to certainly teach that. What's weird is that I think a lot of the Trump kind of people think that critical race theory is communism, which it is not, right? A lot of the Trump people think that LGBT is communism. I mean, the communists have been big supporters of LGBT rights historically. Lillian Hellman, who wrote the first Broadway play about LGBT rights, she was a communist. Harry Hay, who started the first gay rights organization, he was a communist. The idea that teaching that LGBT people exist is a communist conspiracy, I think that's not accurate. Pride, they just had Pride here in New York City. I wasn't here, I was out of town, but, all kinds of big corporations and Republicans and NYPD and all kinds of, the idea that LGBT is communism is pretty ridiculous. This is part of what the conservatives are pushing now. Conservatives are trying to push this idea that everything they don't like is Marxism. And honestly, we have to be careful with this because it's the synthetic left is toxic, right? Look how hateful these people are. These people are awful people. They think you are a Nazi. Did you know that? You're watching this, you've nodded your head in agreement with me, and we're pro-LGBT, and we're pro-people of color, and we are not promoting any kind of anti-Semitism or bigotry, but somehow, I know how? Somehow, this is a Nazi podcast. Did you know? I don't know how that works. Don't know. Somehow they have, in the minds of good bread tube synthetic left weirdos, we're Nazis on here, right? That's insanity. That's deranged mental illness, right? And that's what the synthetic left pushes. And if we're Nazis, you can bet average Americans are Nazis, right? If average Americans are religious conservatives who might have an issue with LGBT, well, then they must be Nazis, right? If my goodness, if these people, they think that, that capitalism is a great system, definitely Nazi. So you can understand why a lot of average Americans look at the synthetic left and they say, this is insanity. This is insanity. These people are dangerous and insane, right? And they look at them and they go around saying things like, we want to destroy America. They're trying to escalate some kind of violent civil war with the alt-right. And, a lot of Americans look at the synthetic left and say, well, we don't want any of that. And so the Republicans say, well, that synthetic left are communists. And they're not. Right? And that's why it's really important. That's why stuff like the Bread Tube book is important. We have to make clear that ain't us. But on the other hand, we do have to also, make clear that we're all working people, and they make the problems of criminal gangs like MS-13 more problematic. Right? The more restrictions, the more you make immigrant communities afraid to call the police, the more people have to enter the country illegally, the more immigrant communities are pushed into the shadows, the stronger the criminal groups are, right? And we can't, we'll talk about that. We can't be supporting anti-immigrant bigotry because it hurts all working people, right? It's a way to divide the workers, to play us against each other. The problem is capitalism, not immigrant workers. We don't want to support anti-immigrant bigotry, right? People should be free to live their life, right? If people are LGBT, they should be allowed to be LGBT, right? It's not my business. It's not your business. And this idea that we should, making people ashamed of who they are, making people hate themselves, making people feel like they don't belong in society, not giving people love, encouraging parents to reject their children, putting people in mental hospital. No, we can't be doing that, right? People are LGBT, they should have the right to be LGBT. Now, if you personally, if your religious beliefs are that, well, we don't think LGBT is okay, well, that's okay. That's your business, right? But you don't have the right to impose your beliefs on anybody else. You can be a Muslim if I can be a Christian. You can be Jewish if I can be a Christian. You can, I mean, people have the right to be who they are and to live according to their own conscience, as long as you don't hurt anybody else. And and so we need to make sure that no one bullies LGBT people. That LGBT people have the right to set up their family however they want. That trans people have the right to continue to live according to how they want to live and to be who they really feel that they are. That is okay. Right? And so, I mean, if someone's going around and saying, otherwise, trying to outlaw gay marriage or trying to tell trans people they aren't allowed to be who they are, that's a problem. We got to oppose that, right? So we're not with the right. We're not with the right, right? The right believes in free market, unregulated capitalism. They believe that capitalism is a great system. Well, capitalism is failing all over the world. Capitalism is imperialism. The right says that Islam is a vast conspiracy. It's all a big terrorist cult that should be outlawed. Well, no. Hey, you on the right, you can have your church, and the Muslims can have their mosques. The Jews can have their synagogues, and, the Buddhists can have their temples. And, that's the way we do things here in the United States. We don't have a religious government here in the United States. We have the separation of church and state, right? And so, the right are wrong as well, right? We understand why a lot of working people are drawn to right-wing ideas. They're drawn to right-wing ideas because they see the synthetic left as a group that wants to destroy them and blatantly says so. I mean, they say they want to destroy America, right? They say they want to have chaos and civil war. They say that that Americans are evil Euro settlers who deserve to be poorer, and so a lot of working people are put off by that. But that doesn't mean the right is right. The right is wrong, right? The right is wrong, right? So it's complicated. We have to be clear that our movement is our movement. Marxism-Leninism is Marxism-Leninism. William Z. Foster, Gus Hall, Huey Newton, Mao Zedong. I mean, we have a unique trajectory. We are not the synthetic left, but we are also not the right, right? We are true leftism. We are the true inheritors of the left-wing tradition of trying to build an ideal world. And we have a materialist understanding. We are anti-imperialists. We are anti-racists. We are for class solidarity, workers' power. That's who we are. That's what we're about, right? We're not the synthetic left, and we're not the right. We are the city-building tendency in human history. We are those who seek to advance human civilization. But anyway, I got kind of way off track there. But yeah, I mean, this is part of the dumb stuff the right are doing, right? And this is, it's whatever, Critical race theory, that's not Marxism, right? To kill a mockingbird, that's not how the Communist Party approached the race issue. And I'm going to talk about that in the lectures that you'll see posted. But anyway, yeah, I'm not surprised that they're doing that. I'm not surprised that there's, a bill to ban communism or whatever in these southern states. And again, that's part of, a mandate that they teach anti-communist propaganda. They already teach anti-communist propaganda in U.S. schools. So that's podium pounding. That's theater. That's right-wing demagogy. And I don't like it. Don't like it one bit. All righty. All right. How many Christian Marxist-Leninists are there? How many Christian Marxist-Leninists are there? Well, first of all, the Russian Communist Party, the KPRF, the official party of Russia that is communist, they recognize the Russian Orthodox Church as the state religion of Russia, and they accept the Russian Orthodox Church. So that's a huge party of millions of people, so there's that. In Latin America, right, the government of Venezuela, the government of Bolivia, the government of Nicaragua have many Marxist-Leninists in the ruling parties, and they also have Christianity as the state religion, and as and it's majority Christians in those parties. Evo Morales was a Christian. Maduro is a Christian, Roman Catholic. And the Sandinistas even have religion in their constitution in Nicaragua. The Sandinista constitution, read the preamble. It refers specifically to Christianity as the state religion, and that says that we are Christians who carry out. I mean, it's in their actual. The preamble. Go read the Nicaraguan Constitution. So Christian MLs are not as uncommon as you would think. Yeah, back in the time of the Cold War, it was pretty uncommon. You were either, communists were atheists, religious people were anti-communists. But that's changed. That's not how things are at this point. And in fact, nowadays, the majority of atheists, look at Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, those people are promoting free market capitalism. Free market capitalism and anti-Islamic bigotry, etc. So the majority of atheists, I would say at this point, are anti-communists. And in the developing world, there's a pretty decent number of Christian communists. Now, to be fair, there are a pretty decent number of atheist communists as well. And in China, I think they are pretty clear. The Chinese Communist Party is not a religious organization. They are atheists and dialectical materialists. They have a good relationship with many Muslims and with many Christians and with many Buddhists, but they are a materialist and dialectical group, and the Chinese Communist Party is pretty much an atheist organization. But Cuba, Fidel Castro did confession with the Pope. Fidel Castro, became religious in the final years of, in his final couple decades, he became religious. Even in North Korea, you wouldn't even think that. You'd think North Korea, they're hardline MLs like the Cold War style, but there's a number of Christians in North Korea. There are regions of North Korea where Christianity is widely practiced, where the majority of people practice Christianity. And in fact, when the Korean Workers' Party was formed, it was a merger of the Korean Communist Party, the Korean Social Democratic Party, as well as there was a political party called the Korean Christian Party that merged into the Korean Workers' Party. So it's more complicated than you would think, right? I believe that religion is a personal matter. It's a personal matter, right? Your relationship with God is your business. And that should be our attitude toward it, right? You can be an atheist, you can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, you can be Jewish. It's your business, right? Your spirituality is your personal business. That's my attitude, right? And there should be no religious test. That's actually what James Connolly, the leader of the Irish National Liberation Struggle, he said that in the Irish Republican Army and in the IRA, there would be no religious test, meaning you didn't have to be Protestant, you didn't have to be Catholic, you didn't have to be an atheist. There was no religious test. That's my position. There should be no religious test for any person in a revolutionary organization, right? Revolutionary organizations focus on politics, not on spirituality. That's my opinion. All righty. Would I read and respond to reviews of my book? Maybe. I posted one of the reviews. The first review that came in was great. It had a little bit of criticism in it, which is fair, right? And you should. If you're gonna review a book and you want to be taken seriously, you should be honest about like a couple things that, if you want it to be a real review, right? But the first review that came in, I loved it. Screenshotted it, tweeted it out. There's been a couple more, and they've been pretty positive for the most part. And so here and there I might, but I'm not going to get into like a tit for tat. And especially with the BreadTube people, I'm not going to engage them anymore. I'm done. I wrote a whole book talking about BreadTube, right? We'll talk about their ideas on here, but I'm done with I'm not going to debate any more of them. I'm tired of this, right? I just spent a great weekend with real people that want to build a real organization. And it's so much more of a positive vibe. So, I've moved on from BreadTube. I'm already thinking about the next book. I was talking to my friend Robert. We have an idea for the next book. It'll be an interesting idea. We've already got the next book in the works. We're moving ahead. I'm going to be doing a lot more streams. Patrons only stream, July 1st. Tune in. It's going to be great. Sign up now if you're on our Patreon. So, I'll take a look at the reviews and I'll do some interviews. I'm already planning to talk with Peter Coffin about my new book. And it's going to be good. So there you go. Reunification of split communist parties. And that kind of ties into the next super chat, which was from Chaya, and she said, unify communists, would it be better? Well, there's a couple layers to this. So let's talk about this, right? I have generally been critical of the concept of left unity for this reason. Communists in the United States are very isolated from the broad masses of people. It's a very, very niche community. It's a very, very niche community of people that, most people in the United States have never met a communist, never met a socialist, have no idea what they believe. And there's a reason for that, right? The left, with the obsession with identity politics, with the obsession with destruction, with the hostility, to average Americans. The left has done a very good job of isolating itself. So if you were going to unify all the people currently calling themselves communists in the United States, in order to do that, you would have to accommodate all of these things that have isolated them from the masses of people, right? I mean, you absolutely couldn't wave an American flag at any of the rally because half the people would leave. They'd say, oh, no, that's the flag of the empire. So you couldn't do that, right? You absolutely couldn't say you want a better life for people in the United States because half of the people calling themselves communists would say, oh, this is a society built on empire. How dare you? And so it's like, on the one hand, the idea of all the communists in the United States getting together sounds like a nightmare to me because it's just a small group of people anyway. And for them to come together would result in, accommodating all the things and solidifying and forcing everyone in the group to adhere to all the things that have kept them isolated. But that said, and again, there's always multiple sides to this. I hope I'm not coming across as two-faced, but that said, I have noticed this, that there are, we do our streams on here, right? I'm not in any party. I'm not even trying to build a party. I'm just trying to build a think tank to promote, a certain understanding. But there are people in the Communist Party who like what I have to say. There are people in the Party of Communists who like what I have to say. There are people in the PSL who like what I have to say. There are people in various Enver Hoxha supporting groups that like what I have to say. There are people in various Mao or Maoist kind of groups who like what I have to say. There are people in DSA who like what I have to say. And I think more and more we will see people who there will start to be unity on the basis of certain principles between different groups. And that will happen. We'll start to see, what do you call that when, we'll start to see convergence around certain principles. What we're doing here with suit socialism, what we're doing here with opposing the synthetic left, with our revolutionary optimism, what we are doing here attracts a certain amount of people. And we're not going to agree on everything, but there's a certain kind of energy that we're going for here that is appealing to many people, that many people see that what we're doing here and they go, I want some of that. And so I think there will be convergence. And there will probably be that on other parts of the left too, right? I mean, there are certain sections of the left that are very focused on the labor movement. And they might be Trotskyites, they might be Maoists, they might be Marxist-Leninists, they might even be social democrats, but they're focused on working in the labor movement. And so there's probably going to be some convergence around that kind of energy. And the same around other things. I think that we're going to see convergence, but we're probably not going to see like full-on left unification for a while. Now, eventually, for us to eventually have socialism, there will have to be a broad progressive coalition. We're very far away from that right now. The synthetic left, they're not going to do that, right? They're not doing that. But as we move toward actually taking power, yes, I think there will be a very broad coalition, but it won't be on the basis of things as they are now. A lot of things will and must change before we can get to the layer of, in Venezuela, they built the United Socialist Party, right? Hugo Chavez, his party was the Movement for the Fifth Republic. You had the Communist Party, you had the Fatherland for All Party, you had the Movement Towards Socialism Party, you had the Tupac Amaru Party. Hugo Chavez, he said, I am going to form one United Socialist Party, PSUV. And it happened on the basis of Chavez and there being a mass movement and a government of action that was moving the country towards socialism. And I think in the United States, there could very easily become a situation eventually where there was a crisis, where there were people that were moving and that there could start to be a coalition. But as things are now, no, we are not in a period of left unification. We are in a period of people trying to figure out what left means. There's a lot of confusion. But there is going to be increasingly convergence around principles, and I think that will happen. But as far as all the communists getting into one group, that won't happen anytime soon because there's so many differences. And the focus at this point, and this is, again, one of the slogans that I've tried to popularize is out of the movement and to the masses. Out of the movement and to the masses. The focus shouldn't be trying to get all the people in the United States that are isolated and fringe and isolated from the broad masses of people to be communists. The focus should be getting to average people. To average people and convincing them to be communists. People who've never met a socialist or a communist before. It's getting out of the movement, getting to the broad masses of people. That needs to be the focus. Instead of trying to unify a fringe element, try to make communism not fringe anymore. So that should be the focus, in my view, right? But will there eventually be some kind of reunification? Sure. All right, I'll have to get back to you about communists from Guatemala. I know there are some, but I don't want to say the wrong thing. I have not heard of this book, The Class War, right? Saw the post that said one giant party, everybody invited, $1 monthly due, buys you a vote on everything, 10-point plan. Would this work? No, Mike, it would not work. All right, I don't know Lenin's New Class War, so I can't comment on that. Lenin's atheism. There's actually a very good essay by Lenin. What should be the view of the Workers' Party on religion? And that lays out Lenin's perspective. And Lenin, while he was an atheist, he did condemn what he called God killing. He did urge the Bolsheviks to refrain from anti-religious propaganda, right? And in that pamphlet, he basically says, look, we're an atheist group. We believe in dialectic materialism. You have to be an atheist to be a Bolshevik. But he says that we should refrain from anti-religious propaganda. And that's an interesting essay. So if you want to know Lenin's view on atheism, I would encourage you to read that essay. Go and dig up Lenin's essay, what should be the role of the Workers' Party on the issue of religion. Ward Churchill, a Fed. No, Ward Churchill's a professor. He's a college professor. He's not a federal agent. He's not an FBI agent. He's not a CIA agent. He's a professor, okay? He's a professor. However, has Ward Churchill collaborated before in Nicaragua during the 1980s? Russell Means, who was a leader of the Native American movement, went to Nicaragua to work with the CIA to work against the Sandinistas. And at that time, Ward Churchill went with him, and Ward Churchill functioned as his speechwriter. And Ward Churchill even went as far as writing an essay for a magazine arguing that it was okay to collaborate with the CIA on behalf of indigenous people. So, no, Ward Churchill is not a government agent. He's not an FBI person. He's not a CIA person. He is somebody who is, part of the Native American movement, who felt it was the right thing to collaborate with the U.S. government and with U.S. imperialism in the name of indigenous rights. Basically, that's what he did. There's a very good book on this. It's a memoir of the Contra War by Roseanne Dunbar Ortiz, where she talks about the role that Ward Churchill played during the Contra War. You can read all about it. And that in Nicaragua, Ward Churchill took the position that U.S. imperialism was basically the lesser of two evils during the Contra War. And that Ward Churchill is very hostile to communists and Marxism, and he feels that, the indigenous way is against both of them, and that there is a convergence of interests between Ward Churchill and a lot of the ultra-rich in the United States. Ward Churchill feels that average Americans have too much stuff. Ward Churchill feels that average Americans are the problem. And so do the Rockefellers. That's why they're driving living standards down. That's why they're trying to build one global economy. That's why they're trying to demolish the economy of the United States into a global, open international system. So there is, in the kind of weird back to the land indigenous ideology that Ward Churchill promotes, and the Rockefellers' Malthusian eco-thinking, there is a convergence of interest. But no, he's a college professor. And the way the right wing went after him was BS, right? So there you go. All right. Should you work hard at a job you hate? Well, that's a value judgment you have to make in the situation, right? You work at a job to pay your bills, to feed your family, and in some cases that job is going to not be fun, and it's not going to be pleasant. But you may need to do it. It's on a case-by-case basis. I think most people hate their job. right? Most people hate their job, right? That's why, there's restaurants, thank God it's Fridays. Most people don't like their job. However, there are some cases where, there are jobs where people have ethical qualms about what they're doing, right? People who are police officers and they just say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. There are people who really, they do a job that is really rewarding. If they're a doctor or a nurse and they help people, right? They might not like doing it, but they feel like it's the right thing to do. So every job is a particular individual situation, and that's a value judgment you have to make in the specific circumstance. That's really what it gets down to. The answer is depends on your life and your situation. Again, I don't tell people how to live their lives for the most part. If you want to, based on what the job is, how you feel about it. Look, there are some people, honestly, if there's a job that is just so miserable or just so contrary to your principles, it might be the right thing to just move on, right? Even though you're desperate and all of that, you think, this is just, I'd rather be unemployed for a little bit and find a better gig. I can't do this. And I remember when I was out of college and I was looking for different jobs, every so often there would be a situation where it was I just couldn't do it, right? I worked in some call centers for a while. I worked in different like fast food kind of places for a while. I worked at gas stations for a while. I moved to New York. I worked at some insurance companies for a while. But every so often, there'd be a situation where I'd get hired, and this job, even though I was desperate, even though I was short of money, I would do the job for a little bit, and I would think, I can't do this. But I tried not to do that, right? Especially when you're economically suffering, you got to white knuckle it, right? You got to just, buck it up and do it. But every so often, there is a situation where you're just like, I can't do this, right? And sometimes there are jobs that are risky. All right, I'll be real. Don't die for your boss, right? Don't die for your boss, right? There have been situations where, there's something shady going on, right? Where your employee wants you to do something and that might be a situation where you have to think, oh, now, is it worth going to federal prison for my boss? No. Is it worth getting run over by a car for my boss? No. Is it worth getting COVID from a boss? No. And there are some times where you have to remember your boss might consider you to be expendable. Right? Might not. But you just got again. But you might have a boss who it just depends on the situation. That's a really broad question. People do all kinds of jobs, right? And there are some jobs that look, when I worked in fast food, I hated it, but I did it because I needed to pay my bills. When I worked at the insurance firm, I hated it, but I needed to do it to pay my bills, right? But there were times when. Yeah, it really just depends. It depends. It's a case-by-case situation. It's a very broad question. The next question I've got, and please keep the super chats rolling in, folks. Got plenty more to talk about, right? The next question was about ebooks. Why are my books not available on an ebook? And I've answered this before, but that's okay. Not everyone sees all of these streams, and so I will answer this once again. I'll answer it once again, right? And actually, you can see right now why I don't make ebooks. There are people who don't have the best intentions and very much, don't really care what we have to say on here, and would like you to believe that somehow, despite the fact that we're anti-racist, despite the fact that we're pro-LGBT, despite the fact that we don't put forward any kind of hate or anti-Semitism, somehow, think that we are white supremacists and are trying to incite Antifa to come kill us all. And, those people are very, very dishonest. And, if those people are going to get their hands on my books, they better pay for it, right? Because people don't tend to take things seriously if they don't pay for them. And people with bad intentions, they often, are not going to go ahead and pay for it, And on top of that, even people who do have, not so bad intentions, They'll take it seriously. They'll take it seriously if they pay for it, right? I mean, when I used to be part of a political group that would just give its newspapers away, often I would see those newspapers on the ground. Why? Because people didn't pay for it. And if you give somebody something for free, often they think it's junk mail and they don't take it seriously. But when people were being charged $1 for a newspaper, they kept it. And by charging $1 for the newspaper, for the socialist newspaper, we were sending out a message that this has value. This means something, right? We're communicating that a worker put their labor into producing it, and and that it has value, and that just giving stuff away is not very working class. And I know a lot of people do read ebooks, but I don't do the ebook thing. I don't do the ebook thing because I feel like my detractors, people that want to smear me, will buy an ebook and then they will type in the search mechanism for like one word, Biden strike on Iran. They'll look for like one word, and they'll find a little quote that they can make into something that it's not. But if they're going to have to buy a whole book, that'll be much harder. They'll have to actually look through the actual pages of it, and they'll have to pay for it. You know what I mean? And that's the thing, right? So I want my books to be for people that care enough about what I have to say to buy an actual book. I don't want my books to be for, one, for people that are just going to quote mine it to make ammo against me. Two, I want people to take it seriously. I want people to actually invest some of their own money into the book. And based on that, I want, my books are for people who actually care about what I have to say. My books are not for people who don't, right? And so if people are willing to invest a small amount for one of my books, they should get it. And for those who, have determined, that's my view. I've repeated myself on this, but this is part about changing the culture of our movement, okay? Because, there is, a whole culture. All right. Worker-owned or state-controlled. There's a whole culture on the left of people getting stuff for free, right? And I mean, it fits in with meetings not starting on time. It fits in with this kind of this attitude that that hey that we need to become working class. We need to become working class. We need to wear suits. We need to look professional. We need to use responsible rhetoric and not advocate destruction. And part of that means paying for the books, and part of that means, paying your dues to the organizations that you join. Right? That's generally what it means. And that changing the culture. So we're not just, we're not a rent-a-mob. We're not Wall Street's rent-a-mob, okay? And that's kind of what leftism has become. Right? It's become that, there's two factions in the ruling class. There's the Trump wing, and there's the wing that is with Biden, and we're the rent-a-mob of Wall Street, right? Wall Street, the ultra-rich are fighting the lower levels of capital. They're fighting the Koch brothers. They're fighting Betsy DeVos and Bernie Marcus. And so we're the rent-a-mob, state capitalism. We're the rent-a-mob of Wall Street to push back against the lower levels of capital. Well, that's not what we should be, right? We should be a group of working people who are going into politics on our own accord to try and change the course of history. That's a very different way of being. And so part of that is changing the culture of our movement, wearing suits, being respectable. There you go. All right. Biden's strike on Iran. Well, that's the thing. So in Syria and in Iraq, there are a number of armed groups that are aligned with Iran, right? In Iraq, you have a lot of, militants, I guess, Wahhabi terrorists that are aligned with Saudi Arabia that are going after and persecuting Shia Muslims. And so Iraq has received the support of the Iranian government, the official Iraqi government, as well as local militias that protect Shia Muslims from terrorism have received support from Iran. In Syria, right, you have, the Syrian government fighting Al-Qaeda, and that, Hezbollah and other Iran-linked armed groups have a presence in Syria. And Trump, you'll remember, attacked those organizations and airstriked them, and now Biden has done the same. And the United States is pushing the envelope. They're saying, what can we get away with? But at the end of the day, Iran helping the Iraqi people to have stability in Iraq, Iran helping Syria to have stability in Syria, it makes sense. Iran wants a stable Syria. Iran wants a stable Iraq. The United States wants instability in Syria, instability in Iraq. It wants Sunnis killing Shias, so that instability can eventually spill over into Iran and they can overthrow the Islamic Republic. So, the USA wants instability in Iraq. The USA wants instability in Syria. The USA wants instability in Afghanistan. Iran and Russia and China have a different agenda. They want economic development and stability because this is in their backyard. So this is part of the U.S. effort to try and prevent Iran from helping Syria and Iraq to stabilize. So there you go. It's not good, right? Not good. And keep in mind, the Iraqis that are in Syria, the Iranians that are in Syria, it's totally a real painting. The Iranians that are in Syria and the Iranians that are in Iraq are there with the permission of the government. The Iraqi government has said to the Iranians, you got the right to be here. The Syrian government has said to the Iranians, you have the right to be here. Meanwhile, there are U.S. troops in Syria. There are U.S. troops in Syria, if USSR still existed. There are U.S. troops in Syria that are there without the permission of the Syrian government. And they have seized Syria's oil without the permission of the Syrian government. So keep in mind, these Iranian-backed militias have the right to be there. The USA does not have the right to be in Syria. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. Should the means of production be worker-owned or state-controlled? Well, see, that's a weird way of framing the question. Let's be very clear that there will be multiple forms of enterprises in a socialist society. Right? I do not maintain that all enterprises should be state-owned, right? Maybe at the beginning, the Soviet Union, in order to industrialize very rapidly in preparation, for the Nazi invasion, and afterwards, they had almost total state ownership, 91%. But China today has a big market sector. So does Vietnam, Venezuela, and that, in a socialist society, there would be many state enterprises, I would think, but there would also be many private for-profit enterprises, and there would also be many cooperative enterprises that are private, but they're cooperatively owned. They have that in Venezuela as well today. And in China, Huawei Technologies is a cooperative. It's a profit-sharing corporation. In the Soviet Union, the collective farms were cooperatives. They sold their agricultural goods to the state, and in return, they got, the state they paid them for whatever they produced. It wasn't like a state-run industry where they just got paid a wage to work out in the fields. They did have some state farms, but it was mainly collective farms, which were technically cooperatives that sold their goods to the state. And there have been different examples of this. For example, in Yugoslavia, you had worker self-management. During the Cultural Revolution in China, you had the 3-in-1 combination and the Shanghai Commune. And that the means of production in socialist societies, I maintain, can operate in different ways. And that you need some private capital to some degree in a socialist society, but there should be a large amount of state ownership. And, there should also be, I think cooperatives are a good thing. Okay. Aesthetic of American communism. Of American communism. Soviet. That's what I maintain. And what is the difference between capitalism and socialism? Well, the difference between capitalism and socialism, and I guess this answers the next question is, what is state capitalism? Why is production carried out? Capitalism is production organized for the profits of owners. Socialism is production for the good of society. or as Frederick Engels put it, production upon a predetermined plan. Capitalism is profits in command. Socialism is production for society or for social use. And in China, for example, you do have production for social use. Some of that production goes on in state-run industries. Some of that production goes on in private industries. Some of those private industries are cooperative. Some of them are just straight up privately owned. But at the end of the day, the Communist Party sets up a 5-year economic plan that controls the economy. And even the private companies are told what they can and cannot produce. And many times you will hear the capitalists, come out in capitalist media and say, there's no such thing as a private company in China. What they mean is that companies in China don't have market freedom. They can't just produce whatever they feel like producing. No. They have a 5-year plan. They have a Communist Party. And that's the difference between capitalism and socialism, right? That's what it is, right? Putin, right? That's the difference, right? Capitalism and socialism are systems of production. And in capitalism, production is carried out for profit. Under socialism, production is carried out for social use. I've given many examples of this over the years. One example, in New York City, often when restaurants have food left over at the end of the night, they'll throw them in the garbage. They'll throw it in the garbage. But before they throw it in the garbage, they'll pour motor oil on top of it. Why? Because they didn't produce that food for people to eat it. They produced that food to make profits from it. And if they didn't pour motor oil on it, some homeless person might eat it out of the garbage, and they wouldn't make any profits. And that homeless person in that neighborhood might buy it from the store if they can put a couple bucks together. And then the store, would lose out if they can just eat it out of the garbage. They wouldn't buy it. Production for profit. Socialism is production for social use. Now, the question of what is state capitalism? State capitalism is Saudi Arabia, right? Saudi Arabia, you have the government heavily involved. Almost everything's run by the government. But what does the government do? It simply facilitates production for profit. Production is organized to make profits for the Saudi royal family and for their cronies. It's still production for profit, but it's heavily got the state involved. In World War II, after World War II, after the war was over and Britain had been bombed and destroyed by the Nazis, they nationalized almost everything. They nationalized the mines and the railroads and a lot of the industries. But it was never a socialist society in Britain because they were simply nationalizing these things to rebuild them for the purpose of maintaining the super profits of British capitalists. And British capitalism, and the domination of British corporations over the world was never dismantled. And yeah, they had a lot of state-run industries in the British homeland, but they were all just functioning to make sure that the flow of profits continued into the hands of the British imperialists. And they functioned according to the market. And you still had all kinds of market-based problems. You still had gluts of overproduction. You still had the irrationality and the anarchy of production. You didn't have state central planning. So you can have the state Singapore. That's a capitalist country, but the state is heavily involved. It's a highly regulated, high amount of government involvement in the economy, but at the end of the day, the economy still functions to make profits for a few rich families. It's a very highly organized society. There's a level of kind of solidarity that comes out of the feudal heritage, but at the end of the day, Singapore is a capitalist country. That's state capitalism. Socialism, on the other hand, is when you have a state that emerges in a revolution, that has a base among the population, a well-organized population, workers' councils, Soviets, right? Bolivarian circles committed to defend the revolution. You have a state based among the population controlling the economy. That is socialism, right? And they may control it by nationalizing everything. They may control it by nationalizing some things, and there's different forms. But at the end of the day, when a state based among the population, a state that emerges in a revolution, when that state controls the economy and forces production to be carried out for social use, not for profit, that's socialism. So there you go. There you go. All right. How would the world be different if the USSR still existed? Again, the more I've studied history and the more I've studied economics, imperialism is a noun, all right? The more I've studied history, the more I've studied economics, right? I've come to the conclusion that you really can't do this coulda, woulda, shoulda, what if this happened, because things happen for so many different reasons. The Soviet Union fell because it needed to adjust, and it was unable to adjust. Their current economic model wasn't going to adjust. You had a very frustrated middle layer of intellectuals and professors and others that were very frustrated. You had a political situation in the country where there was political confusion and there wasn't debate up front. And how in the world would you have stopped the USSR from falling? I mean, the United States very effectively manipulated, but at the end of the day, what if it still, in order for the USSR to have existed, it would have had to have been able to change. And for the USSR to have been able to change, the world conditions that made the USSR the way it was would have had to have not been there. Do you see why hypotheticals like this don't really work out, right? Because there are so many factors involved, right, that it's like, the world would be a completely different world in many, many, many different ways. And you wouldn't have had the neoliberalism and the economic disaster of Russia in the 1990s. Yeah, and then, of course, you wouldn't have had, Latin America, neoliberalism there, and maybe China would still be aligned with the United States. There's so many different factors there. You don't know, right? And again, for the USSR not to have fallen, there would have been so many other different factors there. So you can't really play the hypothetical game. You just can't do it. Leave that to novelists, right? Leave that to Philip Roth and people that write alternate history novels. Read it to them. Leave it to them. But, read it to, Superman, the Red Sun or something like that. But you really can't do that. It's not something you can do. The more you really understand this stuff, the more you realize you can't play these games. All right. The aesthetic of American communism. Why the Soviet aesthetics? Look, I'm wearing a suit here. I'm not wearing a Soviet costume, right? And, we should wear suits. That's what serious politicians in the United States look like. I don't think people should dress up in costumes, right? If people want to wear pins, that's fine. At the end of the day, we need to look like serious politicians. All right, DPRK stopped reforms. We need to look like serious politicians who want to help our country, and we want to help it with socialism, right? And we need to look like rational, normal, healthy human beings who love our country and love our community, and on the basis of that, want to get beyond capitalism. Will America destroy Africa to stop the China? Okay. That's what we need. Next question. All right. Putin. Well, are there things that are admirable about Putin? Yeah, Putin fixed the economy of Russia. In the 1990s, the economy of Russia was a disaster, right? Free market policies, it was a libertarian country. Free market, they sold off everything, 30% unemployment, mass hunger in the streets. It was a disaster. Putin came in there, and he put oil and gas under state ownership, and he fixed the economy. And by doing that, he stabilized the country, and people's wages vastly increased, agricultural output increased. Putin has presided over a farming boom in Russia. They're having some of the biggest harvests in all of Russian history. There are many positive attributes. There's plenty of things you can be critical of the Putin government about as well. Right? There's certainly some social conservatism there. There's certainly a lot of corruption in Russia. Anyone who goes there says we do have a problem with corruption that needs to be dealt with, right? We shouldn't be blind apologists for anybody, but, overall, have things gotten better in Russia since Putin's been in power? Yes, very much. And if that's something you just can't hear, right? If it's like, no, I heard on CNN he's bad. Well, look, the world is not black and white. People are not all good and all bad. It's complicated. Putin is very popular in Russia, extremely popular in Russia because of how much he improved things. Under Boris Yeltsin in the 90s, things were very bad. The fall of the USSR was an economic disaster, right? We're all told about, communism is so bad. Well, after they implemented the American free market system, Russia was destroyed. And Putin rescued Russia from that nightmare, by reasserting a level of state ownership. And if that's something that you think I should be canceled for saying, or you just can't comprehend how that's true, I don't know what to tell you, right? Some things are true, some things are not. Has Russia vastly improved since Putin's been in office? Yes, it has. That is a fact. And anyone who tells you anything different is lying to you, okay? The Yeltsin years were a nightmare, and things got much better under Putin, right? And if that's not something that we can be honest about, I mean, Putin's not a communist, right? He's very clear that he's not a communist, right? He is a Russian Orthodox Christian. He's influenced by Marxism, right? He was in the KGB and he studied Marx and Lenin, and he has admiration for many of the things that went on in the Soviet Union. He's very proud of the defeat of the Nazis. And he's very, very opposed to anyone who equates Nazis with communists, because, the defeat of the Nazis is one of the most heroic moments in Russian history. But at the same time, Putin very much is kind of more of an Orthodox Christian and a nationalist. He has and in some ways, Putin's a little more Western, right? Putin is a little more free market. It's complicated. Putin's not a communist. He is definitely not a communist. He is not a Marxist-Leninist. That's not his perspective. But he has implemented economic policies that have benefited Russia, and he is a competitor with Western imperialism. The imperialists don't like Putin because Russia's no longer their playground, and that's something that they won't forgive him for. And the anti-Putin hysteria is not coming from a good place. Are there legit criticisms? Sure. Right? There's definitely a lot of problems they have in Russia today, but Putin overall has been good for the country. Is it possible somebody better could come along? Sure. But there you go. All right, imperialism as a noun. That's very important. Many people use the word imperialism incorrectly. They think imperialism is a verb. They think it's something you do, right? If one country attacks another country, they're imperializing the country, or it's imperialism. No, imperialism is a system. Imperialism is the rule of the world by syndicates and trusts and cartels and monopolies based in the West. And it's the Western capitalist corporations holding back economic development. It is about preventing economic development around the world in order to maintain the rule of Western banks and corporations. NAFTA is a great example of how imperialism works. NAFTA forced Mexican farmers to all go out of business, so they have to import all their agricultural products from the United States. There's one example. British Empire went to India and burned down all the looms and forced them to import their cloth from Britain. That's imperialism. How is it that Nigeria can export so much oil, and still have mass illiteracy, a low life expectancy? How is that possible? Because of imperialism. Imperialism is an economic system. It is a global economic system where banks and corporations and big monopolies based in Western countries hold countries around the world back from developing. They keep countries as poor, captive markets, and they dump their excess commodities on them, right? The capitalists are constantly overproducing commodities, but when a country is bombed and destroyed, when a country doesn't have its own industries, then they have to buy their products from the West. And that's imperialism. And that's why they don't like China, and they don't like Russia, and they don't like Iran, and they don't like Venezuela, and they don't like Cuba, because these are countries that have broken out of Western economic domination. Russia sells its own oil and its own gas, and every ounce of oil and gas that people buy from Russia is oil and gas that they didn't buy from ExxonMobil or BP or Shell. China produces half of all the steel in the world. At the time Mao came to power in 1949, there was not a single steel mill in China. Now half of all the steel in the world is produced in China. And every bit of steel, every pound of steel that somebody buys from China is a pound of steel they didn't buy from American steel companies. And that's what imperialism is. And anti-imperialism is when countries break out of imperialism and start developing on their own. And that's basically what's going on right now. People around the world want to develop. They want to raise up out of poverty. They want access to health care and education. They want electricity in their homes. They want jobs and housing. People want to rise up out of poverty. And the imperialists don't want that. They want people around the world to stay poor, as poor, captive clients. That's what they want, right? And China is resisting imperialism by going to Africa and building hydroelectrical power plants, going to Latin America and Brazil. All over Brazil, there are power plants built by China, raising people up out of poverty, giving people access to electricity so they can build, they can start their own businesses and flourish, right? And that's resistance to imperialism. Imperialism is a global economic system. It's not a verb. It's not something you do. Imperialism is not a policy. It's not an act. It's not a synonym for war. Imperialism is a global system. Lenin wrote a very good book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. It is the rule of the world by monopoly capitalism. That's what imperialism is. It is a global economic setup. It's a noun, not a verb. All right. Why has been the DPRK? Why has the DPRK been stopped from having China-style reforms? Sanctions, right? The DPRK faces crippling economic sanctions that prevent foreign investment from coming in. North Korea wants to have China-style economic reforms. That was a big part of Kim Jong-un's talks with President Trump, right? Trump gave him a flash drive with images of what could be done. North Korea wants to have market reforms, but they can't have it because there's crippling sanctions on the country, right? Because of their nuclear weapons program. North Korea would like to give up their nuclear weapons, but they want to give them up with the assurance there won't be a regime change attack from the United States. So if those sanctions can be lifted, North Korea can move ahead and have a Deng Xiaoping moment. But here's what you have to remember, the 1980s, all across Eastern Europe, a lot of socialist countries had economic reforms. And as a result of those economic reforms, the USA was able to slip influence in there, and there were color revolutions, and the communist governments were overthrown. But in Asia, things have been very different. Vietnam had market reforms during the 1980s, and now the Communist Party of Vietnam is stronger than it was in the 1980s. It's more popular, right? They've had a lot of economic development, people raised out of poverty, booming economy. Vietnam's Communist Party is stronger. China had a lot of economic reforms, late 70s, 80s, up in the 90s. The Chinese Communist Party is stronger. And so there's a wing of the American CIA and intelligence community that says, giving North Korea the ability, lifting those sanctions, giving them the ability to have market reforms might backfire because there's no guarantee that it'll lead to the Korean Workers' Party being overthrown. In fact, it might lead to the Korean Workers' Party getting stronger, just like in China, just like in Vietnam. And the Korean Workers' Party is much more revolutionary because of the Korean War, because of the arduous march where the USA, by preventing North Korea from importing any petroleum, basically caused a food crisis in the country and caused millions of Koreans to starve to death. Because of that, there is a very, very strong anti-imperialist sentiment among the Korean people, right? And that the Korean people, they supported, they gave money and support to the Black Panthers. They welcomed the Black Panthers as heroes. You'll remember that. There are a number of Palestinians who live in North Korea. There are a number of Africans who live in North Korea. They've welcomed revolutionaries from all over the world and given them refuge. And that, the Korean Workers' Party has a very, very, very revolutionary anti-imperialist edge, and it has a very, very, very big vendetta against the United States because the United States killed 4 million Koreans during the Korean War and caused millions of Koreans to starve to death in the 1990s. They have a big vendetta against the United States. So I maintained that the reason that John Bolton and others were trying to sabotage the talks between the United States and North Korea was because they were afraid of giving North Korea access to the global economy. They were afraid of strengthening the Korean Workers' Party because, on the one hand, there's no guarantee that market reforms lead to it being overthrown, number one. And number two, the Korean Workers' Party is much more revolutionary and anti-imperialist and has much more of a grudge with American imperialism, than China and Vietnam do. And so that's why there was an effort to sabotage them. And that must be said. So there you go. I hope that answers your question. But that's what's going on. And we'll see what happens next. I mean, Trump may have started the process. Biden might continue it. He might not. We'll see. We'll see. Is the USA planning to destroy Africa? Well, they destroyed the most prosperous country in Africa already, Libya. At this point, there's a civil war in Nigeria. You have the Boko Haram terrorists. There's many people in Nigeria who believe that Boko Haram may have ties to Saudi Arabia. I've never seen significant proof of that, so I'm not ready to thoroughly say that, but there's definitely efforts to foment economic bigotry, and yeah, the USA would rather see the U.S. imperialists, I should say. Average Americans don't want this, but the U.S. imperialists, the Wall Street monopolists, the billionaire capitalist class would certainly rather see Africa destroyed than Africa peacefully develop in cooperation with China. That's true, right? And they've been fomenting destruction and chaos and unrest in Africa for a long time. And there's a lot of African governments that aren't really socialist, aren't left-wing, aren't even progressive, that just want to do business with China because China's a better partner, right? China, treats you better. If you do business with China, they treat you better. It's that simple. So there you go. There you go. Any other further questions before we go? Any other super chat questions? I'll take a couple more questions. If not, we can cut this off. It's been a good conversation. And we'll probably be back tomorrow. I'm probably going to try to get a couple more of these before the end of the week. We shall see. If you want to be on our patrons-only stream, that is on July 1st, so sign up today. Sign up today to be on our patrons-only stream if you're not a patron person already. I buy the new book, BreadTube Serves Imperialism. Link is down below. I guess this is it. So thank you, everybody. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night, folks. Good night.